All right. Hi, I am Sarah Ray from Liminal 11, and I'm here today with Beth Fisher. Hi, Beth.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Beth Fisher. My handle on Instagram and Twitter is Beth and Fish, and have been Tillie Walden's personal assistant since last summer of 2019.
That's so awesome. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Most people who are following Liminal 11 will know that Tillie Walden's Cosmic Slumber Tarot deck is coming out later this year. It's now on pre-order at liminal11.com. Got to get the plug in. And really, we just wanted to talk to Beth about some of the process that goes into creating a deck. It's rare that we kind of have an in with the research assistant. And for all of our tarot beginners and learners out there, we thought this would be some cool insight into how a tarot deck is made. So thank you so much, Beth, for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited. I've mentioned this to you previously, but I've had all of this just jargon trapped in my brain for the last year. So it's nice to finally have a captive audience who I can just word vomit and regurgitate everything that's been rattling around up in my brain.
Well, we're so looking forward to that, and I'm sure everyone who's watching is also. So before we dive into what you did with Tillie, I know you're an artist as well, and I just wanted to see a bit about your background. I know you just said you've just gotten out of art school, so just love to hear a bit about how you got your start.
Right. So my first comic, I would say that what started me down this road was I was 5 years old and I was doing tap lessons downtown, and across the street from my dance studio there was a comic shop, and when I went in I was totally overwhelmed by just how caustic an environment to a small girl a comic shop is. There's a lot of women, very busty women, and skimpy outfits and graphic covers. So I was totally freaked out. And then the store clerk came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I think I have the comic for you," and he handed me Bone by Jeff Smith.
Oh, nice.
So that's probably what started me from the very beginning. Was just I became totally enamored with this comic, and I became enamored with comics in general. And I'd always been a really artsy kid, really obsessed with fairies and stuff. Kind of a boardwalk artist is Amy Brown. She just does these fairy watercolors, and as an adult artist I'm like, oh, these are so cute, but as a little girl I was just like, these are the epitome of fine art and this is what I'm going to do. My career path has changed considerably, but I feel like there still is, I still try to make work that maybe pleases that weird little girl deep in my heart.
That's so cool. And as you were just describing that, I thought about most of the accounts that we're following on our Instagram and who are following us. I think there's a huge popularity of that kind of fairy, fantastical, mystical, esoteric stuff at the moment. There's a lot of people, realizing, oh, I'm a witch, and so much more kind of power and energy coming from that kind of stuff, which is really cool. Like you say, people might dismiss it as a little girlish, but you're definitely not alone in wanting to make that kind of art. It's very cool.
That's definitely true. Yeah, I think that I think that there's something beautiful and very genuine about so many people, and in general, I mean, a lot of illustrators are just sort of grown-ups that'll never really grow up kind of thing. But with regards to fantasy illustration and stuff like that, I feel like most people go into it because they never really lost that that joy with the imagination and
Definitely.
stuff.
Yeah, too much imagination maybe. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not an artist or an illustrator, so I always sit in awe at the creativity that people can create. I'm not creative, so I work in marketing.
I mean, actually, I think one of the really the things that I really appreciated about working with Tillie, because I started working with her as a student. And at my art school, the Rhode Island School of Design, people think that art school would be like some kind of walk in the park, like it's craft time extended, and that is by no means true. Our people usually didn't have like weekends, and people were so overworked all the time because we're all just trying to like hone our skills as fast as we can, because we're like, the debt needs to be worth it. The debt needs to be worth it. And the school has very rigorous standards. But working with Tillie, one of the things that actually she really drilled into me on the opposite end of the spectrum was, she was like, art is a job that you work very hard at, but it needs to be a job. I think that there's so much like sort of obscuring and mystification of creative work, and it makes it out like it, like muse and like, oh, like creativity strikes you. It sort of implies that it's just that it's like magic. It's just sort of this unwieldy force that you're like in tune with the cosmic currents or something. Yeah. No, like it's very much like something where you have to treat it like a 9-to-5, because if any given project is your baby, a baby is a big responsibility. The project will never get done to a satisfactory degree, but if you're practical about it, everything becomes so much more manageable.
Yeah, I guess there's that moment, like with any job, where you sit down and you think, I'm working. And Tillie actually brought that out a lot. She's done another book for us called Mini Meditations on Creativity, and there's a lot of quotes about, the beauty of creativity, but so many of the ones she picked are, about the hard work of it, like nothing will work unless you do. The speaker of that quote is now lost on me, but that's one of the
You're fine. Yeah, no, Tillie herself is very much like a guru about work, I would say, and just like attitudes regarding it. And a bit of a workaholic herself.
I get that feeling, and it shows in what she produces that there's a lot of care. So it's great that she taught you so much, but I guess let's backtrack a little bit and tell me a bit about how you ended up working with Tillie. How did that start?
Right. So it's funny to reflect on now, because similar to like creativity, Tillie herself has been very much demystified to me. But whenever I started working for her, I was a big fan. Specifically, I know a lot of people have found her through On a Sunbeam. Mm-hmm. I was actually obsessed with her comic, The End of Summer.
Oh yeah.
The End of Summer is this comic about like a young sickly boy, and just sort of like the dissolution of his family unit over this one winter, and the melancholia really captured me. And so I emailed her my junior year of college and was basically like, I've applied to like Pixar and Nickelodeon and First Second, like pretty much anywhere I could think of that my skills would be applicable. But those internships are so competitive, and it's like hundreds, if not thousands of people are applying, even at a prestigious art school. It doesn't really, it's not easy, because thousands of people are applying. You need to make yourself stand out, and they've only got maybe like 2 dozen positions. And so I knew that I needed to make my own opportunities. So I just started emailing artists that I enjoyed and asking them like, hey, do you or anyone need a person? And Tillie actually answered me back and was like, actually, I might need a PA this summer. And I thought at the time that it must be that I was the only person who asked her. I was like, oh, okay, this is great. But like, you know, she must not get a lot of fan mail. And then she told me later, she was like, no, I get like 5 people asking me that like a day. Me to hire them. And I was like, oh. Actually, what struck her about it was that it was very professional, which I think set her at ease because it's not this like mouth breathing fan. Not that mouth breathing fans aren't appreciated, but I think when you know that you're going to be working with someone for a month or more, you're sort of like, okay, I need a modicum of distance. But also though she really I had a short little sentence about what I liked about the end of summer, and she was like, oh, that was very, like, it was very touching what you said. So then, you know, flash forward and now we're like best friends, which is crazy. It's wild to me to remember that I was a fan, because now, I mean, you're always like a fan of your friends, but it's your relationship to their work is so different. It's more like a conversation with the person than like this conversation that you have within yourself in connection to the work.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And like you said, it's been demystified a bit. And I guess especially getting to see how she works, you understand the process that made this piece of art that you love. I've read The End of Summer as well. I love it. It's actually a really good quarantine read.
Yeah,
Obviously,
seriously.
at this point, we're in June 2020, and a lot of people are coming out of quarantine. But I did read it a few months ago when we were allowed to leave our houses, and it definitely has that pressure of being stuck indoors.
Yeah. Well, there's probably going to be a part 2, so pick it up at your local comic store.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
All right. So tell us a bit about your role in developing Cosmic Slumber Tarot. What did you do with Tillie? How did the process work?
Right. So at the start, you and your team sent Tillie a little like stack of books that you were like, this is recommended tarot reading. And she was like, hey, Beth, this is recommended tarot reading. And I was like, okay, got it. And I just started out by taking notes, and specifically because so what became very clear to me at the start was that there were basically 2 like schools of thought with the original tarot, and it was like Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck versus the Rider-Waite deck, and the Rider-Waite is maybe more iconic, and that's like the more like mainstream deck. But Tillie did want to make this deck. She did want it to connect with like people who like knew their stuff, you know, especially with like the symbolism, because the images are so rich with like icons and symbols that have so many deep meanings. And so I basically started out with those readings, and then I moved on from there to comparing those 2 decks and kind of getting at like what was the reasoning behind different symbols. Because also going into the project, we kind of knew from the outset that tarot and sort of Western occult often has a hearty history of appropriating symbols from different parts of the world, and not necessarily always in a very intelligent or considered way. So we kind of wanted to disseminate like what in the deck is sort of like iconic symbols, and what's sort of just like slapping in some like Jewish mysticism, some like, you know, some Egyptian sphinxes for flavor. We kind of wanted to just sort of like be a little bit more discerning.
Mm-hmm.
and so that was part, but at the same time though, it's like, sometimes even because actually like, Arthur Waite, the guy who made the Rider-Waite deck or commissioned it, he was part of like the Order of the Golden Dawn and stuff. I also did some research into like the background of like what led up to the creation and things. But in that order and in a lot of occult at the time, it seems like they kind of just sort of like, yeah, sort of slapdash like drew from Jewish mysticism, but and so like there is sort of this like, you know, were they consulting anyone, any like Jewish mystics on that? Probably not. But at the same time, there are times where it's parallel. There's an intersection of sort of this like appropriation of different spiritual practices, but also not like a significance to a number of like flames and stuff that's actually like interesting and significant. For instance, I'm thinking of like the main wands card, and like there's this torch that has, I think it's a pattern of 3 flames, 4 flames, 3 flames on like the side, the front, and the side. And it's interesting because just like randomly drawing from my like brain, I remember it being like for instance in the Thoth deck, Aleister Crowley would always talk about like yods and just sort of like these vaguely Eastern spiritual practices and like and Jewish mysticism that just sort of was like, dude, I don't know, like if you're sort of like quilting together or making this just a random fruit salad of terminology. But at the same time though, it was also this connection with sort of like paganism and like the and like raise like that number orientation was related to like the tree of life, and it just sort of like it had to do with like connecting to like the energy coming from the tree of life, with which like the wands are like a suit oriented around like high energy and like high velocity and just like everything being on fire. So there are times where even though it also kind of is like entrenched in like this weirdness, it also is kind of important to the meaning of the card. So that was basically my job, was to disseminate and just sort of go through all these readings, and then after doing all the readings, going back onto the internet and to other readings and just sort of like checking through what everything means and just sort of parsing through.
Right. Then you have to do it 77 more times for each card.
Hey.
Which is a huge job, and that's not even counting, you know, Tillie's art. And for those who have been following you on social media, and again, that's Beth and Fish for those who aren't, you've been sharing some of your kind of illustrative notes pages where you've kind of both taken notes on what you've just described, kind of what symbols matter, what does this card really mean. You've also done some great sketches that kind of help the essence of the card too.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I started out by doing these sketches purely for, they did end up becoming really fun to do, but I started out by doing them purely because like describing the symbols simply wasn't going to be an effective use of time. So it made more sense for me to make these sort of these little sketchy versions myself and highlight them and annotate them with like what all the symbols mean, and then I just sort of would include like a blurb about like the overall meaning of the card.
Yeah, well, I've actually learned a lot myself from looking at your notes that you've been sharing. You know, I work for a tarot publisher, but I have only been using the tarot for a few years, and it's more kind of for personal growth, and I guess I don't think that much about the deeper symbolism. And like you say, they draw from all sorts of different traditions and historical, cultural, folklore. There's so much in it, and it's amazing that you put that much effort into understanding every single card. Were you into tarot before you did this with Tillie, or was this your first ever dive in?
So I would say that I was into tarot in the sense that, as I mentioned previously, as like a weird little girl who loved fairies and stuff, I was always sort of like, tarot's cool, um, in this very like distant, removed kind of way. But actually, yeah, after doing this project, I really came to appreciate it. I don't know if I don't know if I necessarily uh believe in the tarot as like I don't know, I'm like stitious, I'm not superstitious, but I'm stitious. But I really appreciate the tarot now as just this really smart framework for decision making, because that's really what it's about. It's kind of about just like or not necessarily decision making, but just sort of like a framework to help you like organize your state of mind and how you move through life and stuff. And it's actually, it's very thoughtful. Like even though in certain ways I can be a little bit critical or mocking of some of its roots, because Western occultism is like a little mix of uh just weird people doing weird things, but also so, like very intelligent spirituality. And I think I really came to like respect the tarot over this project, and I honestly, I love it now. I definitely am getting one of Tillie's decks for myself.
Good. Yeah. Well, obviously we're going to give you one. Yeah, I totally agree with you in the sense of, I think a lot of people, especially maybe of our kind of generation, see it more as a tool for like personal, spiritual kind of decision making and mental health. Um, I don't know. I love your take on it though. It's just it kind of for me, it's like I already kind of know the answer, but I need help making sure I'm certain about that answer. And I find the tarot is usually really helpful in just making me be critical of a situation, or see the good and the bad, or the potential good or bad in any choice I make. So it's a really cool take. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and something that I started to say to Tillie a lot towards like the end of the project, once I really had this like overall, image of like because we were talking about like all the research that went in. I will say that the most concentrated research went into the major arcana and like the royal houses of the suits. I would say the minor arcana, most of the cards, because the major arcana are supposed to have so many facets to them, the minor arcana are more individual, so they're actually a lot more simplistic. But uh I was losing my train of thought, but what I found so interesting as I started to get this like overall picture of just all the personalities of the cards, like I really started to refer to them as kind of like personalities. The more and more, the bigger picture I got, the more I was struck by how the cards really are oriented around just very optimistic practicality, and they're really challenging you to think through think through the answers that they give you in a way that induces self-reflection. It's really a tool for self-reflection. Although some people, obviously, as a tool for divination, it's incredibly useful. But I think what connected with me as someone who's researching it the most was just that it seemed to in sort of telling you about like your past and your present and your future, or like how you need to think about X issue. It's kind of encouraging you to just sort of take stock of the situation that you're in and sort of ask yourself, like, how can you productively move forward?
Yeah, it's like
I
taking.
really respected that. I was like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, I think we all have a lot of stereotypes about what tarot means. I mean, I'm from the South and a pretty religious conservative place, so my whole life it was like tarot's satanic. Grew up and I've kind of branched out a bit more than my upbringing, but there's a lot of kind of stereotypes and cliches that it's easy to get caught up in. But the power in these things lies in your own interpretation and the way that you choose to use it. So like you say, for a lot of people, it is a very powerful divinatory tool, and for others, it's a chance to reflect before we, dive into making a big decision. So I think it just depends on what each individual person needs it for, which is one of my favorite things about tarot. Is, as you say, it's so packed full of different things, and also it can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to one of the things you touched on, which was actually one of my favorite bits from Tillie's introduction to the deck, that you would assign kind of personalities to certain cards. I was just wondering if you had a few favorites or really like obvious ones, who you thought might be fun to share.
I mean, I really, okay, so the only like direct comparison to a real life person that I can really remember was I said that the Queen of Cups is just like Cate Blanchett's Galadriel, very like ethereal and like dreamy and stuff. But I will say that like I gave very detailed descriptions of the type of people each card would be, especially in like the royal houses. So I can remember that like, and people when my notes come out, they can like look for these because there will be like little blurbs. I know I'm not supposed to swear, so I'll just like, indicate. But like on the Prince of Cups, I was like, that bitch, because he because like the whole card is oriented around subterfuge. So I was like, this guy is just like that that like pretty jerk who just
so
like,
charming, right?
yeah, he will definitely like screw you over. He's the type of person who would like, would sort of pit like his girlfriends or like boyfriends against each other and just sort of be like, what? There are so many, I mean, but they're also, though, I mean, like with the personalities of the cards, it's like they can be very like funny and stuff. Like the entirety of the swords deck is just like a goth family. But at the same time, like especially with the major arcana, I feel like the character is usually just like a very like they're always meant to be sort of a guide. So I feel like with the major arcana, it's always like they are just sort of rooting for you. For instance, like everyone always thinks that the Tower is just like the worst card ever, and it kind of is. I mean, it indicates a cataclysm, which is just,
I mean,
like,
look at what's happening around us right now. We are in the Tower at the moment, aren't we?
yeah, seriously. But with regards to the Tower, I mean, at the same time, like one of the symbols that I thought was interesting, and I was like, you know what, this is frankly just sweet, is that the card, the Tower should always be sort of old looking. People often make sure that the tower is a stone tower because there is supposed to be this symbolic double meaning that even though like the tower is being destroyed, an aspect of it being destroyed might be that it was out of date. It needed like change needed to happen by that point.
You have to knock
So
the whole house down and rebuild on a stronger foundation or some, I mean, that's how I always interpret it as someone who is struggling
exactly.
with the tower card in life. It's, you know, oh, right, this is about what you do after the tower falls, not the tower falling itself. And that's another cool thing about the tarot is you can look at most cards that way. No one likes getting death or the devil, but again, they all have a separate meaning about overcoming or rebirth or growth, which you know, if you choose to kind of lean into that optimism, again, it can be really healing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say that the characters of the deck, I mean, within the house suits, there's always just sort of a hilarity to thinking about like the family politics of these because, you know, the wands are crazy, the swords are goths, the cups are hippies, and the coins are just like very practical, normal people who just like want to do, I mean, I said coins, pentacles.
They call them coins, and I think discs in our Luna Soul deck. That's what they're called.
Yeah, Tillie and I were like, the pentacles is so cool. So I feel like I've offended myself calling it coins. But yeah, no, but I would say that the character of the major arcana pretty specifically is usually just like they're watching you like go through your life and they're just like, okay, you can do it, come on. They're just rooting for you. They want you to do it so bad.
Oh, that's a really nice image that I'm going to keep in my head for my next reading and just picture them cheering me on.
Yeah.
Are there any particular cards or even an entire suit that like you personally identified with, or like this card is me? Because I mean, I have one, and I'm sure most people do. I'm curious if you do.
You know, Tillie and I talked about this because so Tillie and I decided that Tillie is almost definitely a pentacles person.
Yeah.
Very, very practical. And goal oriented. I would say that I am most likely well, as far as like a house and like personality, I'm definitely, I would say, in like the wands house because I'm a very passion oriented person. But I would say that the card that actually connects with me personally the most, and this is going to sound edgy, but stay with me, is the death card. I not to get too into it, but I have experienced really intense loss in my life, and I guess just something that I really appreciated about that card was that it does have the whole the sun is silent because there's a symbol of like the sun rising or setting over the horizon. It's like you don't know which it is. I guess the notion that death can be like more about change and transformation was very touching to me, and I think it's the card that's probably stuck in my head the most. Also, I just really enjoyed doing the research on that card because a lot of people are obsessed with it because it's like death. Oh my gosh, mortality.
Yeah, a lot of cultures don't deal with death very well, and we don't know how to think about it without, you know, feeling a lot of sadness because death is a sad thing. But like you say, that kind of other side of it, which is rebirth, or some people might believe in reincarnation, your energy being released back into the earth. It's a beautiful thing, even when sad things are happening, I guess.
Yeah, and I appreciated that, like, you know, as a card, it didn't only indicate death. It's like it more just indicates like the end of like something and something important to you, most likely, and that I think that as I was saying with like the arcana are really about like optimistic pragmatism, and so I think like death is a card that lays it straight and is just like it's over. It's done. And you kind of and it but it's also encouraging you to kind of like transform after that.
Yeah, closure, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mine's not that deep, to be honest, but I always see myself as the page or princess. I was about to say pentacles, but it's cups, because I'm very watery in many ways. I'm trying to
Oh,
be a bit
yes.
more. I'm trying to be a bit more like that Kate Blanchett as Galadriel version, like the Queen of Cups. But to be honest, I'm still growing, so it's that part. More of a
Yeah, well,
princess.
aren't we all? No,
Sorry.
and I love the princesses, and I love the princes. You know, or they, in some decks they're called knights and pages and stuff,
Yeah.
but we sort of simplified it to just make them little because they can also be called like princes and princesses. We were like, let's go for the royal family thing.
Yeah.
Um,
It really
but
works with Tillie's style too, because they look like the little prince, a lot of them.
oh, I love how the princes and princesses, you know, there is more of a stateliness to the kings and queens. The princes and princesses feel more like stupid teenagers, like in the way that like the meanings behind the cards, it always just sounds so much more like headstrong or just sort of like a little misguided. But I think that there is, of course, something to identify with that. I would say that if I had like a personality that I identified with, it would probably be the Princess of Wands.
So aside from a much deeper understanding of the tarot, what do you think you learned from your experience working with Tillie, not just as like an artist, but as a human or as a storyteller?
So I mentioned earlier that I mean, as like I mentioned that Tillie is a pentacle person and that she made art making a lot more practical a process for me. I will also say that just in becoming friends with her, like genuine friends, it it was really interesting. I mean, people probably can guess from like the character of a lot of her like written work, but she's a very self-reflective person. And I mean, coincidentally, we've talked so much about how this is like a tool for self-reflection. Maybe it just created this like perfect stew pot for me to like sort of figure myself out. But she really encourages a person to, in their work, but also in their life, orient yourself around just sort of like finding a balance internally, and just sort of, you know, like the cards, kind of having like a pragmatic optimism. I mean, I think, oh, my cat has arrived.
Yes.
um I think Tillie is just a very is just someone who encourages you to approach the world very thoughtfully. I mean, she's a very withdrawn person from the world, but I think she has a lot to, as a friend, teach a person about like having a really healthy relationship with yourself and just being very comfortable by yourself alone. um and so, and I mean, as an illustrator, it's like a lot of my work is frankly like not in an office, and it's about, you know, and driven by me pulling genuine emotion from myself, and drawing inspiration from, you know, like authentic lived experience. And I think they're actually, as funny as it is, even though art is maybe driven by that, there's a lot of inauthenticity in art and in the culture of artists and stuff like that. And I think she sort of helped me like balance out some of maybe the bad habits I had picked up from art school, and just sort of oh, there she goes. And just sort of encouraged me to really solidify myself as a person and as an artist, and who I want to be, what kind of art maker I want to be. Sorry, that's very wordy and
Oh,
drawn
it's
out.
okay. It sounds like a wonderful experience, and it sounds like the kind of thing, you know, it takes half a lifetime for a lot of people to learn, but you know, you had a great opportunity there. It's really cool. I'm loving seeing the cat, by the way. What's their name again?
Her name is Cinnamon.
Hello, Cinnamon. Everyone likes to see a cat on screen. Oh. Oh, well, while you fuss on Cinnamon, I have one last question, which is, we're obviously going to plug the deck. If you had a friend who was really skeptical and you wanted to convince them to buy the deck, what is like the bottom line you would say to them?
I mean, I just think like get them because they're beautiful. I mean, like, it's a very well-made deck. And you know, I made sure that symbolically everything that needed to be there is there. But also I just think like the colors are gorgeous, and it's just a very beautiful, well-made object. I mean, and you can't always say that for a lot of things. For a lot of just like mass produced stuff, a lot of it's kind of just like you think it's kind of ugly in a year, but it's a very classic deck. And besides that, I mean, who doesn't, even if you're not, even if you don't really want to like connect with it as like a tool for self-reflection, or even if you don't believe in divination, it's like, who doesn't love to just like break out a deck at like a dinner party or something and just be like, hey, want to do I remember in middle school, whenever I would just be like at sleepovers, like, let's do palm readings. It's just like, it's fun. It's fun, yeah. And it's pretty. And I worked really hard on it, so please buy it.
Well, there you have it. Yeah, it is a great party trick, and I've used it as an icebreaker when I've met new friends, which I lived in a new city recently, and I had to like meet brand new friends and brought a tarot deck. It's a good way of weeding out the people who thought I was weird, and you know, I met some friends who absolutely loved it. It's a great way of you know, getting a conversation going, if nothing else. But like you said,
you can parse out the judgmental meanies. Just be like, come on, humor me.
Yeah, you don't really need the cards to tell you that. Just put the deck on the table.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, Beth, just to close things off, I just thought I'd ask what you're working on now, or if there's anything you'd like to plug, or a website where people can find your work.
Okay, so that once again, my handle on Twitter and Instagram is Beth and Fish, and that is also
that on the screen.
Thank you. And bethandfish.com is my website. I'm gonna be posting my shop really soon, and people can buy prints of my work or stickers, maybe t-shirts if I can get a hold of some silkscreen equipment. But keep an eye on like my social media if you are interested in any of that, and also keep an eye on my social media because I'm in the process of making my own comics. I have 2 comics currently in the works. One is about 2 sisters, and one of the sisters is having essentially an illicit affair with a sea monster, and it's very there's a lot of psychological horror in that one. And then the other one on the other end of the spectrum is about a little boy who dresses up as a cat to participate in a circus of cats in fairyland. So it's like one is a sort of sexy adult horror, the other one is fun little kids having fun. So, you know, there's something for everyone. Please check out my work. Please look at me.
We'll definitely share when you have more stuff up for sale, because I think our following is going to really like your work, Beth. And those sound amazing. I love the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Obviously, you're in a time where you can be really creative.
I find balance.
Yeah. It's nice to get to try out lots of different ideas, though, and obviously you're in a place where you can do that now, which is super cool.
Yeah. Now that I'm out of school, it's like it's a lot easier to do projects when you're not dying of assignment. So yeah.
Great. Well, Beth Fisher, thank you so much for talking to us today. Just one last reminder for everyone, Beth Fisher is on Instagram and Twitter, Beth and Fish, all one word. And The Cosmic Slumber Tarot by Tillie Walden is published in October. It's out for pre-order now at liminal11.com, but you can also get it from bookstores all around the world. You can find us online at liminal_11. You guys can ask us questions about the tarot decks or leave us a comment if there's anything you want to know. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Bye the deck.